Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
Situation and circumstance. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance? Situations and circumstances. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. How can we see each other with only a glance? Cake mix and race mixes, matrix, kill the witches, 3 digits, made of 6s, KKK.
Welcome to KCBZ on kcbzradio.com. This is Situation and Circumstance, and I will be your host, Mr. Classic. And say what's up to Julius. What's up, Julius?
Yo, what up, Mr. Classic?
Hey, you got it. You got it. What's up, Mariah?
Hello, Classic.
Yeah. Hey. How you guys feeling today?
Can't complain.
Good.
Yeah?
I'm ready.
I'm feeling pretty good, too. This is our first episode, and we're real proud of that. We're going to talk about a couple of things today. Situation and circumstance. First, a little bit about that. We sit in that sweet spot of perpetual metamorphosis, layered with perspective. All over the world, there is a situation and circumstance. And so today, our situation looks a little bit like this. The African, or rather the Black African American, versus the Black African in America. And so we want to talk a little bit about, is there any pressure to, as an African American, is there any pressure to hold on to the African identity and what that pressure looks like? We also want to talk a little bit about, what are the other choices if we so decided that we would take the name African out of African American and just be Black? So we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. We're going to follow it up with our hot and current situation, kind of a double jeopardy question regarding Cardi B, and just talk a little bit about what's going on right now. Is it fair in regards to what's happening with our men and our women and what that's looking like nowadays? And so yeah, it's going to be a really nice show. We're going to play a little bit of music in between there. And, let's just jump right in. And so, Julius, I want to ask you, so what are your thoughts or first of all, what should I call you? Should I call you a Black African American? Should I call you an African American? What's the title that makes you feel like who you are? What describes you the best? Or should I call you an Israelite? I don't know. What?
Not American.
Not American.
I identify as Pan-African.
Okay.
So, no, I can dig the blackness. You could call me Black as well, but I myself identify as Pan-African. I don't want to embrace too much of American society.
Interesting. What I actually find interesting about that, because I've as a 47-year-old Black African American male, I have struggled with a lot of the different names, right? So we know all the names, right? What is it? You got depending on whose mouth we want to use to say these things, right? We got nigger, and we got nigga, and we got Negro, and we got colored, and we got people of color, which is a wider range of people that fit into that category. And then we have African American, we got Black, and then I think for me, I may be one of the few people that are actually using the name Black African American. And I think that from what I can recall, I think during like the NAACP and part of that time, and you may be able to shed a little bit more light on that, considering your endeavors with them. But I believe that part of adding the word African to our legacy was that we were here in a country where we weren't proud to have that African heritage, right? When I think about my oldest thoughts of Africa, and probably most people that are around my age or older, maybe a little younger as well, the earliest thoughts are always that of flies on their face, bathing with the animals, just this really negative vision. And as jokes, I remember me and my friends would say stuff like, "Oh, that's why you're an African booty scratcher," right? Or we said, "Yeah, you look like a spear chucker," or we used the word African as a demeaning epithet to describe our own people.
Yeah, we do.
And so I always thought that maybe I don't have any documentation behind this, but I always thought that maybe the African part was added as a way of helping us remember that part of who we were at a time where just being black wasn't a method at which we could be as proud as we wanted to do.
Yeah, no doubt. We media is propaganda. It's brainwashing. Malcolm X said, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. And for me, that's what it was. That was the intent, to erase us of our African pride, heritage, love. The same way if you speak to some Africans, and that's a continent, so there's many countries, but if you speak to some people who were born in Africa, they will have a perception of us as being materialistic, as being thuggish, being hardcore. So it's perceptions, but again, it's media. It's media. I think that's the root of a lot of things in America, is a brainwashing. Again, that's the intent. That's what they want us to do, is conquer and divide. So NAACP was started by 3 people, but Du Bois, he was Pan-African. Marcus Garvey, he was Pan-African. And a lot of people who I look up to them.
Right.
So it's my responsibility to further my idols, my heroes, ideas.
Okay. I like that. Mariah. And so I know that earlier we were talking a little bit about someone real dear to you who was African American. And what would you say your perspective on having, was it your grandfather?
My grandfather.
What would you say would be your perspective on, well, first of all, have you ever heard him identify himself as either of the things that were mentioned today, whether that's black or African American or Pan-African?
No, he's actually never spoken about that. He never talked about that. He always talked about his experiences, but he never labeled himself as anything. He always just said, because I'm black. And in that experience, when he was always talking about it. But I would hear it a lot more so from the experiences of my aunts, who is his daughter.
Okay.
And so she's mixed, and so she's black, and she's Filipino.
Okay.
So
I
would
noticed
hear
you
her
said she's
experiences.
black, and then you said she's black and she's Filipino.
Black and Filipino.
Okay. And when you've been with her, do you hear her toggling between the both? Like she says, I'm
Never. It's
biracial,
always-
I'm black and Filipino, or do you sometimes hear her just say I'm black? Or I noticed that some people, when they're mixed, they choose one at different times. What's been your experience with that?
For her, she's always been biracial. She's always been black and Filipino.
Okay.
And then whenever she talks about other people talking about her experiences with other people, then she says that, she's not black enough for them, or she's not Filipino enough for them. And so that coincides with my experience, but she's black. and
Gotcha.
Filipino.
Gotcha. Well, they said that good old one drop of black blood, right? I sometimes wonder if they wish they didn't say that. Yeah. Here's what I wonder. I like what you said, Julius. Here's what I wonder about taking the American part out of the name. So I recall, and we were just talking about this a little earlier, I recall not wanting my sons to have, my last name is Jackson, so automatically, that's Jackson. So I always felt like, okay, once I got a little bit woke. So this happened in the 80s, right, with that woke music, with the KRS-One and Jungle Brothers and X-Clan and all those guys, Paris from the Bay, all those different individuals. And I remember I didn't want my kids to be named anything that I felt like would be oppressive, right? And so, I'm naming them these different names, a swan and a swad, names of African lakes and African princes and all these things. And then I end up thinking, well, okay, well, they don't make the name. The name doesn't make them. They actually make the name. Mm-hmm. Well, so then as I get older, right, I find out that you had these Moors that were already coming into this country way before Columbus. As a matter of fact, they're doing new research now that's saying that potentially not only many of us know that the navigator that brought Columbus here was an African, right? What they're finding out is maybe he wasn't even actually a navigator. They're finding out that potentially he was the captain. And they couldn't put that in the history. Well, they chose not to put it right. The reason I bring that up is because if in fact we were coming here not only before any slave ships and before Columbus and all those rapists, if we were coming here before, you see what I did there? Just nice. If we were coming here before all of them, then my thought is this. Mm-hmm. They do have some evidence suggesting that Africans were here, along with all of the other original inhabitants of this of America. Mm-hmm. If this is the case, then when we think of Native American, then that would include those early Africans. Mm-hmm. And so the same way that someone from South America doesn't call themselves a South African American, they just call themselves a South American. They know they have African roots, but they just call themselves a South American because they've been there since the beginning along with all the other inhabitants that were there, or to some degree at least. And so I wonder then if that's the case with us, and some of us have a lineage tied to the first Americans here, why then wouldn't we actually be American in that same way that a Native American would be? Because indeed we would actually be Native American.
Right. Well, two words. You said coming here, so which means we had to come from somewhere, Africa. No matter where we stopped, you said we came here, and then you said early Africans. So there's two things to me that points out we can't rid ourselves of being African. So although the Moors would have came here, they came from somewhere, being Africa. So I cannot erase that part. And
so is that to say, do you believe that South Americans should be not using the South American name, but should, not that you can speak for them, but would you, in based off the theory that I'm hearing, or what you're saying, do you believe that the South Americans should also not have American there because clearly they came from somewhere else? And then we'd have to go all the way around the planet.
We do.
And everybody came from somewhere else.
That's fine.
And then so then at that point, everyone who traces back where they're from should be calling themselves that.
Correct. I believe so. But I mean, Brazil is the largest demographic of black folks besides countries in Africa. But not everyone in Brazil is from Africa. You have people who were born and raised, and their people came from a different part of the world. Although the folks who were dropped off was in Brazil, Jamaica, Haiti, which is why some speak French. Some speak Portuguese. The Brazilians speak Portuguese because they were conquered by them, right? So who you identify with or who your roots come from, I believe you should identify with. You should have done the research. You should do the homework to see where you come from. So not everybody in South America should embrace African descent if they're not from Africa. Everyone in Jamaica should not embrace where they're African descent just because a boat was dropped off, right? And that's a percentage of it. That's a population, but not every single person can say, yeah, that's my culture. Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Haitians, not everyone particularly came from there.
And so what do you think, what's the damage, Mariah, what do you think the damage is in not, first of all, doing the homework, going far enough back to find out where your ancestors may be from? And then what do you think the damage would be in the name from any cultural perspective? What would be the damage in these different names? Is a name just a name? What would you think would be the damage or lack of? Maybe there is no damage, but what do you think about that whole thing of accepting? Because if we even think about Filipino, right, then there's somewhere that that Filipinos are Philippine. How do you say? How would I say? Filipino. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there would have to be somewhere where that particular culture was from before they got to the Philippines.
Well, this is actually what I dealt with as a little girl. This is one of my biggest things as a little girl, because I'm so mixed with European descent, Native American, Mexican, and Filipino. So I have a very diverse cultural background. Now, if you look at all of those, only one of them is from here, from this space, and that's Native American. All of the other cultures are from elsewhere. And so when I was a little girl, because I didn't see it in media, I didn't see someone that looked like me, that meant that I felt like I'm not enough to be put in media because of how I look. That means I am other. And so for me, that meant because there's no representation, now I need to push that and suppress that because that obviously isn't enough as a human being. And so I had to then do the work of self-love. Who am I as self? And self-respect for all those generations past that had to go through everything that they went through for me to be able to stand or sit right here in this room. So for me, it had a lot to do with loving on those parts that I felt like weren't enough to media and saying I'm more than enough. So that way now I can self-love and self-respect. And then now, like you said, Julius, go back and do that homework on where are my roots from? I want to give that respect and do that justice because I'm sitting right here because of all of those people that went through all these things that in media shows me is not enough.
So then I wonder, then who should... So then when we look at no Native Americans have always been here, although suspiciously they continue to do, all the time they're doing more research and they find some older bones and so I remember the very first, they thought they were only here like 10,000 years. Then it leaped to 20,000. Then it leaped to about 40. Now, most recent in the last 10 years, they found the bones of a little girl in a cave. And now she becomes almost 100,000 years old.
Yeah.
Right? And so how old is old enough for you to claim that you are native to that land?
Well, I have
open question.
I have this feeling because Pangea, right?
Yes.
So if there are a bunch of people living on one space, let's just call it one space, and then Pangea started to happen. So now we have different spaces happening. I feel like there was a lot of people that were just in these certain spaces, and they were natives of that space. And for me, that's native of where you're from in that space. And you can travel around and move from place to place. But once you move to a different space, you're not, for me, no longer a native of that space, which is perfectly great. It's just honoring and respecting where you're from and where they're from and where they're coming from too. And for me, that's what it always comes back to is seeing people as people. And I also see that you're different. Let's celebrate that difference. Teach me about that difference. And now let's also let me celebrate my difference from that too. Let me celebrate where I come from and where I'm going to.
I like it. And what I love about what you're saying is in your given situation, there are circumstances, right? You see what I did there?
I see you. I see you.
In your given situation, there are a set of circumstances that led you to feel the way you feel. Just like there are a certain set of circumstances that lead Julius in his way of thinking about it, and mine as well. And so what we're going to do is we're going to stop right there. We're going to go right into a little bit of music while we finish discussing a little bit more about the Black African American versus the Black African in America. What's in the name? Let's get it. Yako, what's happening, man?
Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
KCBZ on kcbzradio.com. This is Mr. Classic, and we're back at we're back at Situation and Circumstance. This is Situation and Circumstance. I'm here with Julius and Mariah, and we're kind of just talking about the different perspectives that we have due to a certain set of circumstances, right? That allow us to feel, believe, or know who we are, what we are, and what we should be, and trying to see if there's really any way that these ideologies can live together, and what does that look like for these ideologies to live together, and should they even live together? During the break, Julius asked me, what was it you asked me about Black African American, how do I identify? And I temporarily identify. Well, I temporarily identify as two things. Interestingly enough,
It is.
I identify as an Israelite.
Okay.
But I haven't done enough of the research in depth to verify everything for me to support that with commentary. So whereas I do believe it based off of what I've read thus far, whether that's in the scriptures and what have you, and in some cases documentaries and different things, there's part of me there. More so, I identify with Black African American, and part of that's because, well, the short answer there is I remember when I was in college, I remember seeing. I remember there were some Africans there, and I wondered, well, okay, you're African and you're in America, so does that make you African American?
Yeah.
Yes, it did. That's what they mark on the sheet there, or other.
Yeah. Okay.
So then, so now when we initially think about that, we're probably thinking, okay, well, African American, okay. But you probably had a visual of somebody that was probably black. So if you're white and you're from Africa,
right,
and you're in America,
right,
are you African American? So when I say Black African American, that's my way of distinguishing that I am black, and I have relation with African, and I have relationship with American. Part of where my American part comes from is not the part of me that feels like it is who America doesn't own my soul. If there was a country that I felt like owed my soul, it would be the one that I haven't never stepped foot on, which would be Africa, because it was the center of Pangea at the time. And so anyone who was here, according to most of the things that I've read, would have been there.
Right.
So that's where my soul would be, and then that would connect with the Israelites and so on and so forth. Yeah. When I think about the black part, I think about the things that we did differently because we were here that made us black in a similar fashion that made other people South American and made other people Australian, or not even Australian, but Aboriginal, right? What made them Aboriginal? What made them, and so on and so. Now, some of this just someone else giving us a name, but so those are the kind of the components. And I've read a little bit about Pan-African. What I'd love to know is, and first of all, if there's any more questions, I don't know if that cleared up some of it, and certainly I welcome your questions, but I also want to know, just for anybody who might be listening, what is the description, or what defines Pan-Africanism?
We will have different definitions. For me, I read Kwame Ture, that's my guy. In his book, Black Power to Pan-Africanism, it is an African person who has an undying love for all African people. Haitians, Jamaicans, people born in Texas, people born in Nigeria, people born in Australia. But an undying love so it's not a thing. It's an idea. It's what you live. So, if you're a vegan, it's a vegan. If you go to the gym, people call you a gym rat. It's a thing. So I don't consider myself a Pan-African. I'm Pan-African. So it's an idea. So I don't. It's hard to define it precisely, because it's something that you live. It's not something that you can really because we have different definitions. So that's how I define it. Someone who has an undying love for everything African.
I like that. An undying love for everything African.
Taking some notes on you there.
Yeah, and I wonder, Mariah, when you hear this conversation, what comes to mind for you? Just hearing this conversation, where two of us are not, haven't settled but haven't separated either. We're together, but we haven't settled on definition, or rather, I should say, on who we are in a way that is I don't want to say comprehensive at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
For me, it goes back to what you said. It's the mark on the sheet, right? I think since the beginning of time, we had to categorize in order to survive back in the day, right? That's what categorization helped us with, was survival. And so now it's like we still have those labels trying to help us categorize, but it's not for survival now. Now it's to quickly understand who this person is. So the marks on the page were always on a Scantron, and I memorized this because I'll tell you why. It was always white, Hispanic, African American, other. So for me, I didn't know which one, and it said only pick one. And that's what sat with me was, why do you want me to categorize myself for you to help you understand me better with one answer? That is unfair for anybody to say, give me a one-word answer that'll help me understand you so I can quickly know what I feel about you. And that's what I feel right here in this space, is like that we're not doing that here. We're trying to understand one another and where we come from internally versus let me just quickly label you. This is, I feel this. So let me learn about that. What is Pan-African? So we learn about that. And so that's what comes to mind when I hear this discussion is what I've always felt about that mark on the sheet is now being erased right here.
I love that. Real dope. What are your thoughts, Julius?
So you said you're a black African American.
Yeah.
Right? So American. So we're speaking of nationality, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because I mean nationality, nation. So it's where we are.
Right.
Right. So I have a friend. Her name is Sarah. Her dad is black. Mom is white. She went to Bali, and she went to Australia, Sydney, Australia, and she's very, very fair skinned. People was like, "Hey, who you with?" The lady who she was with was Filipino, so she was like, "I'm Filipino." Sarah was like, "I'm black and white." They were like, "What? What's black? What's white? That's an American thing." So she was like, I don't know. My dad's black. My mom's white. And they were like, dumbfounded. What is black?
Yeah.
What is white? You know, it's literally very black and white to say that. You know, no pun intended. But it's black. So she had to say, well, my dad is from African descent, and my mom is from European descent. That's how they realized it. You know, so she had to resort to bringing up her Africanness.
And had she ever done that before?
Never.
So for the first time, she was faced with this, wait, you're categorizing yourself as these two things, but okay, you're a human, but help me to understand what does that even mean? You're human?
Right.
You're human.
Right.
But what does black, white mean to me? Is that supposed to make me feel like, or think something?
You know, that's interesting too, because I had a friend, when I was in college, I had a friend from South America. Okay. And she was very dark skinned. And I remember her saying, I didn't know how black I was until I moved here. Right? Wow. Because they didn't have people saying things, or at least she hadn't ran into anyone saying things like, oh, you're so pretty to be so dark, or you have, like, bringing attention to it in a way where it's odd or different. It's just, hey, it's just a color, right? And then I think about well, this black experience, right? And so there's something for me that feels like, okay, I remember Kendrick saying in one of the songs, Kendrick Lamar saying, don't call me black no more. It ain't facts no more, right?
Yeah.
Black is just a color.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that we can say that about lots of things. We can say black is just a word. We can say a lot of things these are just words. But then we breathe the life into what that means to have what that word actually means.
Right.
And I feel like when you have something like black, here's a word that you have that people have bred negative life into.
Yeah.
And then you have people who've bred positive or breathed positive life into out of necessity. Because when someone is making you feel inadequate because of the very thing that they're showing, they're making you feel inadequate because of your skin. Well, then I feel like when you empower a word that stems from self-hate in order to turn it around, and then when I say that, well, does that usher in this okayness for other words now, right? So then if that's the case, then nigga should sure be okay. Because we've taken that name from nigga and put a nigga in, which that's a whole nother story. Yeah. But then it almost makes it like, okay, then that should be okay because we've breathed life into that. But then even the reality of that word, right? So then these are just the words, right? So then even the reality of that word, when we look at nigga and we look at nigger, well, there's been people who say, well, that comes from the word, the Latin word negro, which meant black. Right. Okay, well, that's one theory.
Yeah.
The other theory is that it comes from words like netcha and netger and stuff like that. That actually, every one of the words that sound the closest like the word nigga were words that were empowerment, right? They meant godlike. They meant sun god, huh? King. They meant all these beautiful things. So you're telling me that the word nigga came from the word nigger, that came from words that meant the same thing that our youngsters are saying they mean when they say nigga now. Now, we know they don't mean maybe king. Right. They may not mean, they're not calling you a sun god. Yeah. Right? But it's still a term of endearment. And if we were back in those days and they were calling each other that, then they likely were, especially in their youthful exuberance, they were likely using those words in a similar fashion that didn't mean something hurtful. So I wonder how much of this, how do we become okay with something that we all are, right? And are we all that, right? Because then I like that you brought up, I was watching this movie called Charlie Down Under, and it's a really, really good movie, and it's about these Aboriginals in Australia. Okay. And they're just like us, where in terms of, some very dark and some, when they sent all those rapists over there, some of them did some of the things that they did. And so there's lots of mixtures and things of that sort. And so they're in a very similar situation. And I remember like a couple of them, some of them were calling each other black. Like this thing that we're doing here has transcended, right? Or it's crossed the seas. And there were some that were calling themselves black that when I saw them, if I had saw them somewhere, I wouldn't have thought they were black.
How do you define black?
Right.
Because, like you have, if you look at Buddha, he has some forms of Buddha. He has a little curly hair. He has the big lips. Some forms. If you go to the Mayans, they have big statues.
Absolutely.
So we identify that as black.
Well, quick answer would be phenotypes, right? So the quick answer would be the phenotypes. Everything you mentioned, it would be the kinky of the hair, it would be the widening of the nose, it would be the larger lips, it would be the cheekbones at a certain height and level. So the quick answer to that would be the phenotypes is how we would describe it. Okay. Unless you're describing it as an experience.
Okay.
Can we be an experience?
That's not how but yeah, you can.
You can't? Tell me how you, what? Come on now, talk to me.
Because you have, it depends where you are. It depends on where you are. If you are, so So I was, 18, 19. I've been pulled over 15 times. I'm 26. When I had my first car, I had a Buick Century. People in the Bay call those scrapers, okay? My mom was like, you keep getting pulled over, it's because of your car. It's because of your car, it's because of your car. My car broke down, transmission went out, and I was in my dad's Trans Am. It's red. Got pulled over. Mom was like, it's a car, it's a car, it's a car, it's a car. So I'm in her car. It's a Jeep, white Jeep. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
2012, the newest car that I've ever been in. I keep getting pulled over. The common denomination is me being black.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the car. It's not what I wear. I work at a bank now, so I would wear a suit and tie and stuff like that. So yeah, the common denomination is me being black. So are you referring to like experience in that form?
Potentially.
Okay.
I mean, I think that there are several different ways of looking at that experience. I think this is a good time. There's a poem that Smokey Robinson did, and when I saw this poem, or rather when I heard it, it's from Def Poetry Jam.
Nice.
And when I heard it, first of all, I'm a Smokey Robinson fan. I love that guy. Just he's a phenomenal songwriter, of course. You can't listen to slow jams and not have some songs from Smokey on there. But when I heard this poem, people kept telling me you gotta listen to this, because even at that time, and this was maybe, I don't know, feels like 15 years ago or somewhere like that. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe longer, shorter distance, maybe between 10 and 15. And at that time, I was still in mid struggle. Even at that age, I was still in mid struggle with identification. Knowing that I was some level of black or African or Pan-African or Israel, all of these things,
Right.
But I didn't accept that someone would just simply want it to be black. I actually didn't appreciate that.
I got you.
And so I want to get into this poem and see what you and Mariah both think about this. Once again, we're here at KCBZ on kcbzradio.com. This is Situation and Circumstances. Let's get right into it. Haga.
Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
Oh, yeah. Once again, we're here at KCBZ on kcbzradio.com. This is Situation and Circumstances. I am Mr. Classic. I'm here with Julius and Mariah, and we're just having a real friendly conversation regarding just what's in the name in terms of, specifically African-American, Black African-American, Black, Pan-African and Israelite, all these different things. And so I wonder, we've just listened to Smokey Robinson. Turns out that was about 9 years ago on Def Poetry Jam. I'm wondering what I'm actually anxious and excited to hear what both of your thoughts would be on what you just heard. Can we start with you, Mariah?
I love Smokey. I love him so much. That was so real.
Right?
And raw.
Didn't even know he got down like that.
Oh,
right?
my gosh. I was just sitting here taking it in. I wish I could have been there, but glad I got to hear it. There was a few things that really hit me about what he said. One of those things was, how come I didn't get a chance to vote on who I get to be? And so that goes back to people wanting to put something on you, versus them getting to understand you. And that's what I hear when I hear like the Black experience. I want to know, what is your experience as you in this body? What is that like? And I think that's what a lot of what he said brought up for me. He said, black isn't a color, it's our core. So tell me about your core. And going back to what Julius's friend went through, how when she went to Bali and the people that approached her said, black, white, what does this mean? That's what I feel is, I want to understand what your experience is, and I don't want to discount your experience. And I think that's a huge thing, is you looking a certain way in this world, unfortunately for some people, means that they treat you a certain way. And instead of getting to understand just who you are as a human being, now teach me about this, help me to understand, help me to celebrate you. Instead of doing that, now they get their chance to vote on what you stand for, just based off of the context of your color.
Very well put. Very well put. And deep and dope.
Yeah, God. Okay. It was good. It was artistic. It sounded good.
What's come on with it?
No, it was good. It was cool.
You seem like you're grudgingly accepted that it was good. Like
it had a nice flow.
Good, but
it was musically very good.
Got a critic.
Musically,
it sounded good. You have to. He started it off with what? Saying, 1 second. He said, I love being called black. I love being an American. That's hard it just seems impossible for a black person in America to say, I love being an American. To me, it just sounds very hard to say that. You have to be you have to be doing something of that thing to be considered that thing. If I put on a basketball jersey, you're not gonna be like, hey, you're a basketball player. I have to be playing basketball, right? If I go to a restaurant, I can't just sit in a restaurant. I have to be eating at that restaurant to be like, hey, well, you're a diner. You're dining at this restaurant. I can't just be sitting in that thing. If I was born in a ghetto and I lived in a ghetto, you might not ever know that, but you're not going to call me ghetto because I'm not acting, quote unquote, ghetto, right? So just because I'm in that area does not make me that area. Just because I live in the hood does not make me hood. Just because I live just because I'm in a gym does not make me practicing. Just because I live in America does not make me an American. And I'm sure as hell not proud to be dubbed an American. I have very few things to say that's great about America. As a black man, there's very few experiences that I can say, yeah, that made me feel good. This is one of the few that I can say this openly. That's one, because you have censorship in other countries and you're like, hey, they'll cut your head off if you say, well, I'm denouncing this country. So there's very few things, but I don't think that makes America unique enough for me to say publicly, for sure not publicly, I love being an American. To me, that's blasphemous.
I heard that.
That's how do you
my nature.
I mean, that's wild to me.
You know what though? I mean, so I have this skin and I certainly know not only know what it feels like, but remember very uncomfortably what it feels like to realize how much of an American I am not. Right? I know what that feels like.
Okay.
And so then I think about, okay, here we go now again with the name thing. So if there were enough positive if the positive influences of not only black but any culture who has donated enough blood, sweat, and tears to make the country what it is, I feel like there is a earned Americanship that surpasses the intent of what someone who thinks America needs to be made great again might feel, or what somebody who really, because here's the thing. I feel like, okay, who built the White House? We know slaves built the White House, right? Okay. And we look at who made these improvements, and potentially, the more they study, might have had so much more to do with things like the cotton gin, which is where we wouldn't have even had vehicles and all these other things, right? So when I look back at all the things we do know that African Americans have created, Black African Americans, Black folk, etc.
Yep.
If we look at the things that we know that they made, and we look at the things that and we consider how many things were absolutely taken from them, which is a whole lot that we can't even prove, but a whole lot of that, right? And we look at all those things, then there's a part of me that feels like it's less to do with the name being American and more to do with whatever you call this place that we're at. How dare somebody make it appear at any point that we're not part of whatever that name would be, in the sense of we have contributed what the country needed to sustain itself in labor and all of that, making them the money and all of that. And so even if we made money for those who we would have preferred not to have been able to have it, it's still, to me, it's like, okay, but still we did a lot of work here.
Yeah.
And so to me, whether it's less to do with the name American, I think that comes from a guy named Amerigo Vespucci or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. We know less about the person who the name came from than the name itself, which tells you how unimportant the name America actually is, in the sense of it being this name of like it only represents certain people. Because most people who are part of the same culture as the person who the name came from don't even know who that is. So to me, it's like, okay, well, I denounce America in the sense of it's not, America doesn't love me, right? So that's part of it. On the other hand, what would happen if America was the America that the early, I almost called them rapists. I couldn't keep calling people rapists because everybody wasn't a rapist. But what would happen if what would happen if that vision of having this melting pot, right? What would happen if that actually, if it worked and it turned into that, and no one was, there's no more police officers pretending that their lack of training made them kill someone. All these different things. There wasn't people who stood up for each other, and to the point where now they don't have to stand for each other no more, because now we've surpassed that level of idiocy and ignorance. What would happen if we all had love here, right? Then, and it was now like, well, you weren't in the white 2012 vehicle getting stopped by the police, and you didn't have to mark other on the application. You were able to mark more accurately what you are. Then how would you feel about being? Would it still then not be okay to be considered or called an American in that sense? I guess I'm trying to see, how do we get past the past well, let's not go there. I mean, I set myself up for that one. But does that make sense what I'm saying? How do you what are your thoughts on, what would be your thoughts on that part? And then we'll go to Julius.
It reminds me of what you said about the name doesn't make you make the name. That's when you were just talking, that's what it reminded me of. And then I also thought too, on the other hand, when I go travel as a solo woman, I never say I'm an American, ever, ever. Because it's the intention behind the word, right? And I don't like what's going, I don't feel good about the intention behind American. Even though I'm from this space that we like to call United States of America, I don't need to call myself American in order to be from this place. I say I'm from I say I'm a Californian. I'm from this is my space that I'm from. So for me, there's so much history behind the word American. There's a lot of history. And two things about that. One, when I was traveling in Narnia, we'll call it, there was this woman from South America. And another woman next to me, I think she was from like Indiana or something, she said, I'm American. And the South American said, well, then I'm American too. So just because you're from North America doesn't mean that you get to call yourself American. And what about me? I'm from South America. I'm an American too. And so that's the thing, is it is what you call it to be. What is the intention for you under that word? And so for me, the word American doesn't stand for what I feel in my heart. I don't feel that. I don't rep that.
Yeah.
I don't like when someone says "Make America Great Again." I go, let's make the world great. Let's collectively come together and let's look at the issues that are actually happening and not just mull it over with just a quick swipe. And it's the wrong swipe, in my opinion. Let's really look at what's going on here.
Right.
I dig it.
Yeah, it's Doug, brother.
Yeah,
it's Doug.
that's woo.
So we are actually running out a little bit of time. I want to get some last thoughts from you on this particular. We're going to go into something else in just a moment, but I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that, as well as give us a last thought on it.
So your question, just to summarize, if America upheld the promises in the Constitution, we're equal, all this good stuff, how would I think that?
Yes.
It's impossible to even fathom that idea, because that was written, 1776. So my brothers and sisters, parents and grandpa, they already existed. They were already here. So it's impossible for me to think 200 years later, 300 years later, oh, let's be brothers and sisters. Let's say everybody's born equal. Today, the reason why I'm here was because y'all raped us and killed us and murdered us. So my idea of America is off that. It's not of 1776. It's not of the Constitution. It's not of the amendments. I mean, if I was an American, we wouldn't be fighting for legislation. I wouldn't be trying to be legal. They wouldn't be trying to legalize blackness if that's the case. So no, my idea of American is rooted in how America took over. It's imperialism. It's not brotherhood. It's not sisterhood. It's not promises. It's not values. That's the opposite of how America was born. That's why we are ahead right now, because of 400 years of free labor. So for me, it's like literally not even trying to be. It's literally impossible for me to think like, well, what if? It's too far gone. Maybe, in 1619, like, hey, let's start over, or, in 1512, like it's 1492 in Columbus. It's impossible for me to like think what would have happened.
Very well said.
What about you?
Me?
In this perfect world, if the promises of the Constitution was upheld, would you have more pride in just saying I'm American? Take away the black, take away the African. If the promises was just, would you say I'm American?
I think also too, look who wrote that. I think it reminds me of what's happening right now. Like, let's just sweep it over. All is good if we just do this. No, because you're not talking to everybody. You're not. If we're supposed to be this melting pot of people, everybody collectively needs to be a part of this, and we all need to hear each other out. And I think some people aren't hearing other people out and their experience and what's really going on. And
facts.
Going back to that declaration, some people were not allowed to sign that or be a part of it.
I'll say this as we could certainly go on with this, and I would love to. What I will say is that I believe that here's the situation. Everywhere we exist on this planet, we've been treated in a trucked up way.
True.
A lot of mother truckers. Right. And so I feel like as a result of that, even names like Africa, mind you, I haven't did all the research to find out where that name came from, but I have an idea because it wasn't the original name. Nor was most of the names in places that we are located. Yeah. And so, if we are not American, then nor is the Australians Australian, and nor is the Africans African, and so on and so forth. And so I believe that So that's the situation, is that everywhere we've been, there's been these rapes. So someone will always be able to say, we can't just sweep past that. Pain has happened on every place in the planet at this point.
Okay.
And so I believe that if I claim to be a black African American with knowledge of the part of me that's Pan-African, of knowledge that that's not something that I'm claiming, it's something I be, right? If I go back and I look at, we all come from Pangea, and I allow myself to believe I'm Pangean, right? Which is still a name someone created that may not have had us in mind either. What if the person? So I think that as humans, we need names to describe things. We don't always appreciate those names. We don't always like them, and all those names shouldn't exist. And we should be continuing to fight to change the narrative. But I also believe that as long as we continue to have the discussion so that we understand why we're choosing the different names, it does so much more for us to understand why you're that. Then it won't matter to me that you're that.
Yeah.
Because I know why you're that and why you're saying that.
Right.
And so it's the conversation that has to happen. And that's what we do here on Situation and Circumstance. When we come back, we will be going into a completely different conversation. We'll be talking a little bit about what's going on with, is there a double jeopardy that exists, and this double jeopardy between men and women. And we're going to use a couple of people, a couple of names to discuss that, one being Cardi B and what's happening with her right now. I'm sure you guys have heard. So we're going to jump right into that. Once again, here at Circumstance and Situation, or Situation and Circumstance, here on KCBZ, baby!
Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
Once again, welcome back to KCBZradio.com. And this is Situation and Circumstance. I am Mr. Classic here with Julius and Mariah.
Oh.
And we just listened and heard from, what some are saying is the freshest new female rapper out there. Some are saying that. Some are saying. I like Dreezy. Anyway, I said it. You heard it here. I like Dreezy and not only Dreezy. I like a couple other ones, but Cardi B, I haven't given her a full chance, and really, it's today is. I mean, it's part of this is about her music, and part of it is this sparking this conversation about is there double jeopardy? So that being. Let's give some context here. So, if they took small pins, sharpened them, and they stuck them under the fingernails of every male who has wronged a woman and deserving of that kind of treatment, hey, I'd sign a paper that said yes to that kind of treatment. I want to just start this off with saying that in no way is it or should it ever be condoned to be disrespecting or disrespectful to any other human beings, and most certainly not our beautiful queens and princes. Having said that,
Preach.
There's a situation. I was talking to some of my coworkers the other day actually about the same thing. There's a situation where for me sometimes I feel like I miss some of the days where, like, you can't have a company party anymore, right? Because it's too risky for a company to have a company party, because if a couple of people drink a little bit and one person says something that either gets taken the right way and it was wrong, or gets taken the wrong way, and that being between a man and a woman, many things could happen. And so I remember we were talking about how, let's say for instance, let's say her name is Sheila, And let's say Sheila's there, and Hank walks over to Sheila, and he touches her on the shoulder, and he says, "You know what? You are looking phenomenal today." They're at a Christmas party, and he says, "You're looking phenomenal today. I like the choice that you wore." And just let me know. I'm going over where the drinks are. If you think you might want a drink, just, come on over and join me, Sheila. Right? And so then he walks away. Now, what he didn't know was Sheila had been abused several times. And that thing that he did where he touched her on the shoulder has brought up some real feelings for her. Right? His intentions wasn't to make her feel that way. And he doesn't have a background in doing anything sleazy or shisty or anything like that, right? But she feels uncomfortable about it. And I feel like we're at this space now where certain things that would happen between heterosexuals, I feel like we're at a space where, number one, we should be looking at it differently, because there's been a lot of disrespect that's just been swept under the rug. But then but it seems like the fun is being swept under the rug with it. And I'm not saying like, oh, what do you mean fun? Like, you mean someone getting touched inappropriately inappropriately or any of that? Not that. No. But where's that fun at? And are men experiencing, or rather are women experiencing the same onslaught as the men are? Have they ever? Should they be? And then Cardi B is this perfect example. And so before we even jump into what Cardi B actually said, I'm curious as to your thoughts, both of your thoughts on just that part of it, just the part about where we're at right now in our interactions as men and women. I know that's pretty vague, but
it's deep though. I don't know where to start.
I'll say as a woman, myself as a woman, how I feel about that. Two things. One, the intention, you said. I don't know that person's intention. And even if they say something based off of my past, and that's what's tough, is you don't know that person's past. Like in my past, there have been so many men that my intentions weren't to do this to you, yet they really were, because as we further along in this circumstance, in this situation, I know what your intentions were and are, but you just don't want to say it because it'll make you look a certain way, right? So really, when someone says their intentions, for me now, it's my feeling. I can feel their intentions without them even saying it. So that was a perfect example of how you said touching of the shoulder. Now I do rideshare as a form of income. I have a gentleman in the back with his partner who is a woman, and multiple times, the first time he touched my shoulder, let me just touch your shoulder because I'm laughing and I want to graze you really quickly. And two more times after that, on the 20-minute ride, he grazed my shoulder again, from the back to the front seat. Now I can feel your intention every time you touch my shoulder is not because you're laughing and you just, oh my goodness, you're so close to me, I could just slap my knee. No, your intention is you have an in your head to touch me. And so now you get to touch me. You get to touch me. And that is the issue. It makes me sick right now thinking about that. The fact that you feel that you get to touch me. And why is that? Is it because you're an older white male and everyone has treated you like you're able to do whatever the heck you want? I don't know. Yeah. I'd have to ask him, and he'd have to be honest about it. But even if he's quote unquote honest about it, is he? I don't know. And then two, why do you need to touch anybody right now? Like I'm a human being. I'm not for you to put your hands on or for you to feel like you can do whatever you want to do in life. And so I think it's a person by person thing. Yeah. And in that moment I could feel the different intention, whereas somebody else, I won't feel that when they graze my shoulder because they're just grazing my shoulder.
Right. That's a good answer. It's a good answer. It's a fantastic answer. So then let me ask you this: when you hear about people like R. Kelly or Bill Cosby or please someone throw me some lighter complected names out there.
Chris Brown.
What? I meant some
Weinstein?
Culture, right, thank you.
Okay.
So,
Weinstein.
There's a lot of, I don't want to.
Yeah. You went there.
That's where we were at.
Yeah, you just gonna start mentioning some other Pan Africans, huh? Okay, so wow. When you hear that, the things that are happening to them, and hey, I'm all for it. Even though, like I said earlier, when we were during a break, I said, I'm all for, if R. Kelly did, or it looks to me that he did it, hey, he needs to suffer the consequences. But I feel like take R. Kelly to jail and put him in the same cop car as those Catholic priests.
Yes.
Right? So that's always been my problem. And people will do the thing where they'll be like, well, it doesn't matter what color he is. If you did something wrong, you should go to jail or whatever happened. You're right. But can we start leveling the playing field to where everyone who's done that are experiencing the same level of ridicule in the media, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what I want to ask you is, so then when we look at Cardi B, and Cardi B said the whole thing that's going on is she talked about in one of her other songs, I had it pulled up here, I don't know what happened, but she talked about in one of her other songs that she was basically drugging and then robbing men. And then there was some, sex and other things presumably involved. From what other people are saying, that there was sex involved, right?
Right.
So when we hear that, well, it sounds exactly, with the exception of, now, she hasn't said a number, so we don't know if it was 3 men or 50 or 80 or 100. We don't know if any men are going to start coming forth and saying, Cardi B drugged and but my thing is, well, are we, even at this point, is it getting enough attention, and is it being treated the same, and should it be treated the same, considering there is a much larger history of men inflicting this kind of damaging atmosphere on women? And so what are your thoughts with that? I know she says, I never claim to be perfect or come from a perfect world with a perfect past.
And no one's saying that, Cardi. No one's saying you're perfect. I think that's the thing, is like, no one's claiming anybody's perfect, because none of us are, firstly. So that doesn't even need to be said. I think that if any human does anything to anybody of that extent, yes, it needs to be across the board. You are treated the same as anybody else, no matter how much money you have, no matter how much hype you have, no matter how many fans you have. You did what you did. And I don't think it's getting enough attention. I didn't even know about it until you brought it up to me. And that's huge, that I don't know about. I love Cardi B's music. I didn't know that about this situation until you just brought it up to me.
Oh, you made
a bit ago.
I'm a media slut.
No. I love. Go ahead. Please do. I'm glad I know about it now, because I did sit there and I watched back to back the R. Kelly documentary series. And if you did do these things, these women came forth, you did these things, then yes, you need to be handled the same exact way across the board. Now, Cardi B, if that happened with her, yes, handled the same exact way.
I can dig it. Julius, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. But to back it up, you said like the intention is huge. Because we often, it's not something that we're proud about as humans, but aesthetics matter. How we look. So if, for example, if somebody a chick rubbed my shoulder, did whatever, and she was like, I didn't think she was attractive, I might be very abrasive towards her. But if I thought she was like beautiful, I'm like, oh, okay, she feeling me. And that goes the same for the other gender. If a good looking dude, you're at the club and he rubbed your shoulder, hey, you want to get a drink? You might. I'm not gonna speak for women, but you might be like, okay, he's my type. Whereas if like a person you might find very unattractive. It's like, hey, you want to get a drink? You're like, what? This is disrespect. Get away from me. You know, like the nerves of this guy to try to push up on me. But if a very good looking fella came up to you and was like, hey, let's get a drink.
I do not do that.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I said I'm not going to speak for it. I know. But I'm saying we tend to give passes to certain complexions.
Yeah.
To certain genders is what you were talking about now. Certain classes, you know, like that exists. Yeah. So, of course, the intent matters, but it's based on person to person. I don't have the same experience as an R. Kelly in his youth. You know, he might have went through some things that I cannot relate to. So I can't speak as to why he did certain things, his intents.
Is there a such thing as a thing he could have went through that could make it okay?
No, I'm not justifying anything. I'm saying things trigger things. So if I was put in a situation and now I'm desensitized to that situation, I might do that to other people because I don't know how. That's all I'm used to. Mm-hmm. That's the environment that I grew up in. Right. If I'm dealing drugs from 8,
it's normalized.
It's normalized, you know. So no, it definitely doesn't justify his wrongdoings, but he has issues in his head that we must take care of. Yes, I believe first.
Does she have issues if she was drugging men?
Oh yeah, she for sure. Everybody. She? No, yes.
Because here's my thing. When she was doing it, no, I'm not saying she doesn't. This is not me saying she doesn't. But what I do think about is we don't know her circumstances either. So when she was doing this, she may have very well been involved in the game. And then how much and what parts of the game make it okay that you had to do certain things? Yeah. Because when you're in the game, that's exactly what it is. When you're from that set of circumstances where you're into pimping and pandering and or gangbanging and all of the different things like that. So it just makes me wonder, like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of reaction before there's in some cases there's too much reaction. In some cases there's not enough reaction. And I think that we haven't developed a balance. And maybe what's happening now is we're developing that. Unfortunately, people are going to suffer more than maybe they should have until we get it right.
Well,
I think going back to what you were saying about, well, there's something in his past that was normalized. And yet, I see what you're saying. And I do want to speak further on that.
Well, I tell you what, we will return with a lot of what we're talking about right now today on situation and circumstance at a later date. We do appreciate everybody from coming, for tuning in with your ears and with your hearts. One of the things that we say here at Situation and Circumstance is that we will be right and wrong and weak and strong because we be learning humans working on liberation and scaffolding a meaningful existence for all. So till the next time, my Pangeans all over the world, we'll see you again.
Situation and circumstance. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance? Situations and circumstances. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. How can we see each other with only a glance?
Cake mix and race mixes, matrix, kill the witches, 3 digits, made of 6s, KKK or white privilege, old spirits, blood riches, real hatred, fake forgiveness, skinny image, fat problems, I don't really know how we solve them, gods made us, kings gave us, 2 enslavers, 2 enslavers, castaways on railways, underground dark web pages, Marvel heroes, connect the zeros, connect the pharaohs, bone marrow, Egyptian princes, dark and ancient, preserve the patience, black and Haitian, white and Asian, British coaches, eat crustaceans, ocean roaches, Illuminati, inject the bodies, GMOs, drug hobbies, Aboriginal, Pan-African, old biblical, reincarnation, hip-hop playlists, vocal rangers, sexist wages, sex changes, the game of life, bullets fly, ruin nights, players clueless, kids' rights, humans fight, nature loses, hard of hearing, dolomite, Darwinism, Garvanite, hates a virus, terabytes, It's hard to live with parasites. Come on.
Situation and circumstance. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance? Situations and circumstances. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. How can we see each other with only a glance?
Look, some of us robotic, programmed to follow. Some of us have logic and we wide awoke. Some of us don't got it till we learning slow. Some of us love God as part of having soul. Some of us robotic, programmed to follow. Some of us have logic and we wide awoke. Some of us don't got it, so we learning slow. Some of us love God as part of having soul.
Situation and circumstance. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance? Situation and circumstances. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. How can we see each other with only